Is there anything we can't get from animal protein that we need certain vegetables periodically?
No.
No phytochemicals, vitamin C.
The proof for the vitamin C is an interesting one. There are two things about that. The practical one is the Inuit Eskimos didn't have access to any significant vitamin C in the form of any plant matter. They were very much we'll call it carnivorous eating group, and able to get some plant matter at times. The animal based diet, animal-based food, meat actually has a small amount of vitamin C in it. So you actually get an adequate amount through that. Our seafarers, historically, were able to travel around, but they were plagued by scurvy. Now, scurvy was actually... I'll come back one step. If you actually eat carbohydrate, to metabolize that, you need vitamin C. Vitamin C inhibits the inhibition of that uric acid pathway. So if you actually get good levels of vitamin C, that will bring down some of that. So remember I talked about fructose gets converted to uric acid, which inhibits nitric oxide. Vitamin C will actually inhibit some of that action, which is Mother Nature brilliantly. Eat the fruit. It's going to poison you with the uric acid, but I'm going to give you a bit of vitamin C to actually inhibit the poison pathway. And I'm going to give you some vitamin D if you have it seasonally. So it's beautifully tied up. But there's been some work over time now to show that actually you don't need vitamin C if you're on a low-carb diet. So if you actually... And again, those seafarers, those explorers way back actually, who weren't feeding their sailors gruel, a carbohydrate, grain-based food, actually travelled around the world without the need of vitamin C. So James Cook, who formerly discovered Australia, but is known as one of the great explorers of the world, his ability to travel the world, because they worked out that they could take limes with them to get rid of scurvy. But if they didn't eat the gruel, they probably didn't need the limes. So again, if the Nordic explorers that preceded them explored right across the northwest, what is the Northwest Channel? It goes across top of Canada.
I'm not sure offhand.
Hey, you're a Canadian. I'm just trying to understand your history of it. I think it's the Northwest Channel. But they explored that, and arguably that whole migration from the Nordic countries across via Greenland into across the top of Canada and then into Russia is actually partly related. They were able to get across there, but they weren't having a lot of carbohydrate. So those explorers, and we're going... now my dates are not clear on this. I'll claim. There's a great book by Jared Diamond called Guns, Germs and Steel. I've got a lot of time for Jared Diamond, but nonetheless, he talks about that. But clearly that exploration pathways, he doesn't talk about the carbohydrate aspect, but they got across there, and the only way you can travel that amount of distance, whether or not it's by land or sea, was that you had to have an animal-based diet, because you weren't going to be able to have your carbohydrates, because you would have gotten scurvy. Again, I often draw a long bow, but it's an interesting hypothesis to then explore. So, do we need vitamin C? No, is a simple answer. If you're not having things which produce inflammation, then you require a lot less vitamin C. So the things which I think cause inflammation is the carbohydrate. Carbohydrate comes with its problems. You need the vitamin C as an antidote. Don't have the carbohydrate, you don't need the antidote. And all the other phytonutrients and things that are talked about are actually rich in an animal-based product. The thing which we haven't talked about, which keeps coming up, however, is a thing called fibre. And again, I think fibre is completely overrated. It's a carbohydrate. It's a non-digestible carbohydrate. It's the celluloses which actually then enter into the hind gut, and they're used for the gut flora. And then the gut flora generate other breakdown products, which are the micronutrients that we require. Now, I don't. You've worked out. I probably don't mind being controversial. It's not that I'm trying to be controversial. It's just that virtually everything in this field is like a house of cards. You poke the house of cards, it just falls down on the first question. And the fact is that we've been completely brainwashed by this propaganda for over 100 years that, we've got to have our sugar, we've got to have our breakfast cereal, we've got to have our carbohydrates, we've got to have our fibre, we've got to reduce our salt. It's all just made up. And when you work out why it's been made up and who's been behind it, then that's a whole other pathway. So fibre, because again, my whole arguments are based on biochemistry. Now, that's the basis of all medical degrees. It's the basis of all science degrees. It's the base of our understanding of life itself. It's based on biochemistry. So fibre is actually, again, one of those things that we don't actually need large amounts of in our diet. And if you've got inflammatory bowel disease, they actually put you on low fibre diets. If you actually increase the amount of fibre, it actually tends to bind up stuff inside the bowel and create more blockages and more inflammation. The gut microbiome is fed by that, but then that if you actually combine that with fructose, you actually get this thing called a bloated stomach. And a lot of people who've given up sugar and cut down on the amount of fibre actually end up with less bloating in their stomach, in their abdomen, sorry, not their stomach. So the whole argument of fibre, I think, is a bit of a con. I'm on a very low fibre diet. I've actually been banned by Belinda from putting a picture up every day on Instagram of what I've dropped into the toilet bowl. I thought here's a very productive bowel without any fibre in it. So everyone will be very happy to know that Belinda bans me from certain things. But it is actually interesting that you don't need. And Paul Mason here in Australia has done a talk on it. Zoe Harcombe's done a talk on it. They're both dear friends. The talks that I would have liked to have done, but it's covered in great detail about the myth of fibre. So if the fibre story is a myth, okay, how come? So, and I think it is, and I think it's the last bastion of survival that the cereal industry have, because we've got the cereal industry on sugar. We don't need sugar. We've got them on carbohydrate. And so the only thing they keep pushing us down, literally shoving down our throats, is the fibre message. Got to have fibre, got to have fibre, got to have fibre. And I think it's made up. So here in Australia, 3 years ago, we had a press release from the Deputy Minister of Health, named by a fellow by the name of David Gillespie. So again, if people want to fact check me, they can. So he came out with a press release saying that we need to increase the amount of fibre in our diet. And you went, okay, that's an interesting statement. And at the bottom of the press release is this statement has been written by Kellogg's. So we've got our health ministry actually doing press releases based on propaganda and marketing put out by the Kellogg's Cornflake Company. I mean, that's how bad this situation has gotten to. So again, the fibre thing, do you know where the fibre story get the benefits? Have you heard of Burkitt?
No.
So Burkitt was a missionary in Africa, and he was an English, I think he was British, might have been a US, but anyway, he was travelling around Africa, and he noted that the African natives did big sloppy poos on the side of the road. It was always big, and the observation was in the US that bowel cancer was on the increase, and people had small, dry, hard poos. Their bowel motions were significantly different. And so Burkitt made the observation as a sort of missionary, self-proclaimed medico, that big sloppy poos actually meant that you didn't end up with bowel cancer. It's just pure association. But he took that premise back to the US, and so therefore the fibre thing was born, literally. But how did we come to believe it? Well, in fact, Burkitt was then funded by the cereal industry to travel around the US for the next 30 years with this story. And there it is. Bang, all of a sudden we believe in fibre being critical. So the gut microbiome is the latest phase of that. We've got to have a healthy gut microbiome. And I agree with that, but I don't think fibre is the answer. You will get a healthy gut microbiome by having a wide variety of natural, seasonal foods which are available to you. And that's been observed for millennia in native tribes, where they've actually got a much healthier gut microbiome than we do in Western society. So again, I think it's the dog wagging, the tail wagging the dog. The food industry wants us to believe in the fibre thing, so it continue to actually produce its food, and we continue to buy it. And all this work done around the gut microbiome sort of just keeps potentiating it, when in fact it's not the fibre we need. We need to have a good, healthy diet without actually all the chemicals that are coming in it with the processed food. Am I right or wrong with it? All I can say is that those people who do the exact opposite of the food guidelines, and they reduce their sugar, their carbohydrate, their seed oils, they've moved towards less plant-based diet, more animal-based diet, end up with less inflammation, better metabolic health, less insulin resistance, less food addiction behaviours, and they're not getting as much fibre in it as they were before. But then that's an entire industry that I'm upsetting with the gut microbiome. But I mean, it's very hard not to upset industries when I start having these conversations, because it's just biochemistry.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
Once you understand where the non-science is coming from, where the propaganda is coming from, and it is industry, pharmaceutical, and religious ideology, now I understand why I was conned in my medical education.